Hey, welcome back to Trek on the Tube. This is not a review. No, it's not. This is a Star Trek Species video. For those of you that are unaware, I originally created this channel before Discovery came along in order to explain and go over some of the elements that make up the Star Trek franchise to new fans. I currently have two ongoing series fulfilling that objective. One is called Canon and Lore, the other Species. Welcome to the latter. Keep in mind these explanation videos are always done as simply as possible, with details being purposefully omitted as to not spoil too much of the rich storytelling Star Trek has to offer. Okay. Star Trek Lower Decks. It has been out for a while now in North America, so most people here have seen it. Hopefully it'll hit the rest of the world sometime soon so that everyone else can have fun with it. But before that happens, I thought maybe we could take a closer look at one of the more visually iconic species of the franchise, the Orions, especially considering one of the four main characters of Lower Decks is one of them. So here we go, Star Trek species, Orions. First introduced in the original series, the Orions have been at the center of some real-world controversies over the years, mostly due to their first and most iconic appearance, the Orion slave girl. Ouch, that's not very Starfleet. That being said, negative attention is attention nonetheless, I guess. And so the species that came into existence with a rocky start still became quite well known within the fandom and popular culture in general, mostly due to cosplaying. Yes, the Orions are those green people from Star Trek you see in conventions all the time. I am going to put all that aside though and focus solely on who the Orions are in universe, how they've changed over the years and how the writers decided to change them. Everything within the realm of representation and real-world impact. You'll have to make up your mind about that yourself. So yes, in universe, the Orions are various shades of green, or at least for the most part. Some have been more yellowish over the years, others grayish, and the animated series even delivered a few blue ones, but generally speaking, yeah, we're talking green with varying hair colorations. Now, like most other species in Star Trek, they are humanoid, and as for their physiology, at face value, they do seem pretty much the same as humans, inside and out, though there's no canon information to prove or disprove that. One interesting thing to note, however, is Orion females can emit special pheromones that can affect and influence members of other species. Mostly males from what we've seen, but there's no way to be definitive on that, especially considering not every species in Star Trek is limited to two genders. Now, this pheromone thing hasn't been shown in every iteration of Star Trek. It's actually only ever come up in Enterprise, when three Orions use them to subdue and manipulate human males. Though, if we're completely honest, back in the original series and animated series, in the rare instances we got to see Orions, not much time was spent developing their culture or personality. Which leads us right into the bulk of what there is to say about the Orions. For most of their existence within the franchise, they have been portrayed as morally compromised individuals. Yes, their government remained neutral in regards to the Federation for a long time, and we have seen Orion embassies pop up on different alien worlds, friend or foe to the Federation over the years. It's also well established that their culture pre-warp, as in pre-space travel, was well worthy of study. And I'm not just talking archaeological sites. I mean, some renowned Federation scientists based their research on Orion advancements of the past. And as crazy as it sounds, we even saw a few Starfleet officers go back in time to study the Orions at the dawn of their civilization. Does that mean that we, the audience, know a lot about their history? No. All we know is that their culture greatly impacted and influenced a lot of neighboring systems and sectors. And that they're bad guys, or at least quite a lot of them are today. Let me explain. The first time we saw Orions on screen was in the original series. First, recreated in an elaborate illusion by a powerful alien species, and then disguised as an Andorian. But although this Orion was nothing more than a fantasy, and this Orion had had surgery done to look like someone else, we did learn enough about them thanks to the dialogue and context to understand that a big part of their community were slave traders and black marketeers. Not only that, but some of them were unstable enough to plan and execute an assassination that would disrupt their neutrality with the Federation just for financial gain. Oh yeah. And later on, we saw them pop up again in the animated series, and they were straight up pirates. stealing a shipment of drugs, and dilithium. The craziest part about all that is once they realized they were in a no-win situation, they planned on destroying their own ship and killing themselves along with the Starfleet vessel they were facing, just to keep on maintaining the appearance of Orion neutrality in regards to the Federation. Morally compromised, indeed. Now, let's move on. In the real world, the original series and the animated series came out in the 60s and 70s, and Orions weren't seen again on screen until the 2000s, over 30 years later in Enterprise. In their first appearance on that show, they were still portrayed pretty much the same way as criminals and thugs, slave traders, black marketeers, just generally speaking bad people, and though thematically that stuck around the next time they were shown, the real world political and social climate had a huge impact on their in-universe lore. Yes, that's where the pheromones came into play, but not just. It was revealed for the first time that it was not the men that were the brains and the ones in control within the Orion species. Oh no, this ain't no patriarchy. Quite the contrary, we learned that all this time it's the females that have been pulling the strings, posing as victims, pretending to be traded off in order to make greater use of their skills, and yes, pheromones when trapping and raiding unsuspecting vessels. Years later, when Discovery came out, we yet again saw a few Orions, and yes, shady they were, selling drugs, taking prisoners, owning sleazy brothels, and that made complete sense considering Discovery is placed in between Enterprise and the original series. Now all this brings us to Tendi from Lower Decks, the only real representation of an Orion in the 24th century. Now I'm not going to go and spoil major plot points or character developments that take place in the show's first season because, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of you guys haven't seen it, but I think we can go over just a few minor details that might help everyone grasp just how much the Orions have changed in these few hundred years. For starters, Tendi is a Starfleet officer. Now this doesn't mean the Orion government is now part of the Federation, but chances are relations have gotten better. Secondly, there is no mention of the pheromones or effect Orion females can have on other species during this first season. Maybe it'll be addressed later, but as of now, nothing. Lastly, Tendi, when confronted with the cliché or stereotype of the shady, morally compromised Orion pirate, is offended. Not only that, but she also explains that not all Orions are that way, and it's been that case for a few years at that point. Species growth, it would seem? Now, before we finish off, I do want to go on a short tangent and talk about something not necessarily Orion specific, but Orion adjacent, the Orion Syndicate. Now, as I said, this isn't necessarily Orion itself, it is Orion adjacent, but it still comes from their people, and it played a big part in Deep Space Nine. The Orion Syndicate is a criminal organization open to any species, founded by the Orions. During a large part of the 24th century, their activities included trafficking, smuggling, slave trading, and racketeering, among other things. See, the Syndicate operated very much like the Mafia or a gang, offering protection and whatnot. They mostly operated out of a sector of space called the Borderlands, but were known to go beyond that on occasion. Alright, I guess that's about it. Technology-wise, there's nothing to talk about other than these Orion ship classes. Let's face it, we haven't spent that much time developing them on screen beyond their criminal ways. Usually, Star Trek finds a way to create a kind of continuity or coherence with design philosophy, but as you can see, these ships don't look anything like one another. Then again, these might not even be Orion built, they could all be stolen. There's no way of even verifying that. They are pirates. And one final thing is the Kelvin timeline. We've seen Orions in all three of those films, and in that alternate reality, some had already joined Starfleet by the 23rd century, which means maybe their society isn't quite the same as it is in the Prime timeline. I think I'll leave it there. I know it wasn't too long, but keep in mind, everyone, some details were omitted on purpose, and considering Star Trek is now an active franchise, we will possibly be getting new information about this species every year, so this video will stay up to date for, I guess, as long as it can. The same can be said about all my other videos as well, by the way. While we're on that note of ever-expanding franchise and growing plot lines, let me just mention Star Trek Discovery Season 3 for a second. You see, this new season doesn't take place in between Enterprise and the original series like the two previous ones. This season takes place 900 and a bit years after that. So of course what that means is the political and social landscape of the universe, of the galaxy, has very much changed. Now that hasn't stopped them from showing us some Orions. Quite the contrary, we've actually seen quite a few. It is worth noting that most of them are still crooks, they're still criminals, they're now part of this organization called the Emerald Chain, but generally speaking, I think they are a much more three-dimensional species and a well-rounded species. Even if the ones we're seeing on screen are usually villains, they're the bad guys. I gotta say, ever since Enterprise, so Enterprise, Lower Decks, Discovery, everyone's been doing a good job at making these characters and these species seem more real. If you enjoyed learning about the Orions, feel free to check out my other species videos and leave a comment telling me what species you want me to do next. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video. Check out those two new exclusive Trek on the Tube holiday season designs. Get them as shirts, get them as mugs. Bring joy to your home this 2020. Let's try finish this year with a smile. Link in the description for those shirts. You can also become a patron and help this channel out financially over on Patreon, like all of these wonderful people. And most of all, live long and prosper.